Welcome back to another amazing episode of Krusty Car News. We have 5 smashing stories for you today. First of all, absolutely devastation for GM. They're screaming for help. Second story, the used car market is in shambles. Find out about your favorite car, truck, SUV. I'm going to give you the updates. The third story, Stellantis, they're in damage control. Which brands are they going to pitch? The fourth story, if you thought car prices were dropping, you'd be wrong, because there's a car buying frenzy that continues to drive prices up. Should you be buying a vehicle right now? Look at what they were like 10 years ago. What do you think they're going to be like in the future? You make a decision. I'm going to share with you exactly whether you should buy your car now. Grab your favorite beverage, grab your favorite snack. Hold on tight, let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first story, General Motors, they have a massive announcement that's going to absolutely decimate the car industry. Yes, they're screaming for help. They're engaging the tax makers. Things are getting ugly, and they're not sure they can stay in business. They're struggling. They say, we need your help. And a lot of their sales of EVs have fallen far short of the original projection in 2024 of 400,000 units that they had promised to sell. They've only managed to sell 114,000. Now, some people say, well, General Motors has done wonderful. They're only second to Tesla. But that's a telling story because things are only about to get worse. California is one of the strongest advocates for ensuring that manufacturers are only going to sell vehicles that are pure zero emissions, like electric or battery powered, or as well hydrogen by 2035. As many as 18 states has pretty much got on board. So there's a strong inertia to get the industry over to 2035 zero emissions. But that doesn't align with the industry, and General Motors is panicking, and they're sending out messages to each and every one of their salaried employees to reach out and lobby lawmakers to try to change this whole rules. Because clearly this does not align, and they will absolutely decimate the car industry as we see it today. Now, California set some very strict rules that so many vehicles had to transition. So it wasn't from 0 to 100% by 2035. There was this gradient scale, but you know what we're seeing now is even California's come up far short. Even though California far exceeds the sales of new EVs across the nation, even California's come short. They've only got about 20% of the current market share of new vehicles going in as electric vehicles currently today, when their target by 2026 was supposed to be as much as 35%. Clearly, people just don't want to buy electric vehicles. Now, of course, Tesla, they've been struggling. Sales have been in the tank. And even car companies like Toyota is promising by the next couple of years to have 2 brand new electric vehicles come to market. And as well, Volkswagen's ramping up the sales and the manufacturing of their lowest cost electric vehicle on the market. A lot of brands and a lot of manufacturers not sure exactly what to do, where to stand. They know that they have to try to meet this moving target. But sadly for them, now this moving target has manufacturers scratching their heads and wondering where do they go from here? Because the latest news from General Motors warns that this could be a serious threat to the business. That a lot of these tariffs are going to be applied, are going to have a major impact on whether it's parts or vehicles if they're not manufactured directly on American soil, or even parts that come in to go into some of this construction and manufacturing is going to have a major impact. But it doesn't end there. This idea of transitioning and trying to motivate buyers to buy a lot of these vehicles. And remember that 20% target that California came up short on, that's with the big federal incentives. We already heard just merely a month or two ago, no more extra incentive, none of this $7,500 federal tax credit and all these other credits that a lot of buyers were getting. That's been pulled. The same thing's happening in Canada, where a lot of these incentives are getting removed. What does that mean? Level playing field. So General Motors sent out an email and wrote to all of their salary employees, we need help. General Motors has begun urging their employees to start approaching and lobbying lawmakers to try to make these changes to give them some breathing room, because the headwinds are now strong against the electric market. It's all about choice. General Motors is now believing it should be all about choice, and the lobbying is really more geared around choice rather than just the ultimate in full transformation by 2035. The overall thought is just people want choice. You want to drive an electric vehicle, you want to drive a diesel, you want to drive a gas vehicle, you want to drive a hydrogen vehicle. That's all great, but choice is the key here. And by 2035, California really does not want to give. They've been one of the leading advocates for zero emissions and stand strong on the fact that they don't want to see gas burning and tailpipe emissions by the end of 2034. General Motors has long been a staunch supporter of the fact that you've got to meet the demands of the industry. While emissions and lower emissions, tailpipe emissions, is important to a lot of people, a lot just want to see clean air. We want to breathe the fresh air. The fact is, there are just some realities that the industry is not ready for. Even think of some third world countries. The emissions that are going on in North America relative to other parts of the globe don't even compare. And so this full push, and North America, whether it's the US or Canada, leading the charge for this transformation means a lot of these costs ultimately get transferred down to the buyer. Now, to note, we've got to think vehicles like the GM Hummer, not selling well. How about that new Dodge Challenger, the Chargers, the electric version? Of course, that's not selling. They can't even give those away, and they're also in the tens of thousands of dollars in terms of price reductions. You know, Fiat and their little 500, not many were buying Fiats anyway by Stellantis, but then they transitioned over to 500e, made it pure electric, and almost no sales are happening. I have not ever seen one of those on the road. I see a few of them sitting on car lots here locally, but I've never seen one actually in the wild. I've only seen the old school gas versions, but a lot of people are not ready to get on board with these electric vehicles, and sales are starting to really paint the picture. And as time goes on, there's clearly an underlying buyer base that just don't want electric vehicles, and not because they don't like them. In a lot of cases, it just doesn't work. The practical side. Yes, plugging your car in, having to wait for 8 or 12 hours at home, possibly standing there at a charger for 45 minutes. Any one of these conditions are part of it. But realistically, when you look at the basic geography of North America, you're looking, the vast majority of them get snow on the ground. In other words, freezing temps. Freezing temps have a major negative draw and impact on a lot of these electric vehicles. A lot of these states, a lot of these cities as well, as you move further north, northern US, of course, into Canada, a lot of the cities are really spread out. So range is a real problem. It's taking 3 to 4 hours just to get between cities, and then you have to think about that in the middle of wintertime, that's a real problem. That's a real challenge, and a lot of people are concerned. And that said, GM was possibly looking at battery alternatives, trying to compete with the Chinese market. Of course, price-wise, we even saw Ford admit that we can't compete. The product, the battery technology, and they certainly have the manufacturing costs nailed. And now to try to compete with that just means the likes of General Motors, Fords are all going to struggle trying to be competitive. If those doors ever open for a lot of these foreign markets, it's going to create havoc. And when you consider the core of General Motors, GMC, Chevy, the core of Ford, the core of Ram, those are all internal combustion vehicle lovers. That's why they sell well. That's why they've been selling great numbers of these trucks. Internal combustion, turbo V6s for the Fords. Of course, we're seeing same thing with General Motors and their V8s, and as well with Ram and their new turbo inline 6 Hurricane engine. They're all indications that that's what the buyer base wants. As soon as those manufacturers, i.e., look at Ford went with the Lightning, sales went off a cliff and they had to virtually give those away with huge incentives. That should tell these manufacturers as well as these company leaders enough that people want choice. And while you do see the odd Lightning driving around, you do see the odd Ford Mustang Mach-E driving around, you do see the odd General Motors vehicle, like a Hummer EV. I've seen 1 or 2 of those since they've come out to market. The fact remains is choice seems to rule here. And all General Motors is looking at, without choice and without the flexibility of a more gradual transformation and following what the market demands are, they're definitely targeted for a world of hurt. What do you think? General Motors, do you think they need the help? They've been making money, I think, thus far pretty good on their own. The second story is the used car update. What's going on? What's that car worth now? How about that minivan or that truck? Are prices going up? Well, you know what? I'm going to get into a lot more detail and give you each an individual breakdown of each vehicle type and how they're doing in the used car market today. The latest news is used car market is on fire. Inventory is down. So as a whole, a lot of the used inventory is selling like hotcakes. Okay, first of all, why don't we start with one that's very, very simple, near and dear, of course, are the low-cost, older used cars. Well, what I've seen recently is sales actually, contrary to popular belief, are not that great on older cars. And when I say older, I mean 10, 15, 20-year-old cars. The cars that were really popular about 2 years ago, because the used car prices were spiking, so people were now looking for lower-cost cars, which were driving their values up. Now what we're seeing, a lot of that market's more or less shopped out. What's standing is a lot of junk, a lot of stuff that's been on the market for a while, maybe things that have been wrecked, you know, some backyard mechanic specials. And a lot of people are realizing that. They're starting to figure out that there's just basically a lot of junk out there, okay? So what we're starting to see is a sort of like less excitement and thrill over buyers looking for those really old vehicles, the 15 to 20-year-old cars that were actually affordable to own, cheap to run. Less people excited about those because they realize after shopping for a while, and you know, we've been looking around too for a while, is nobody's really interested with all of the incentives going on the new car space. That's now pushing people more motivation to buy the new cars, okay? Why would you buy an old car that has, you know, mechanical, you know, repairs or disrepair, their body, maybe there's rust, maybe there's some damage. You know, a lot of people now say, well, you know, Mazda offers this or Honda offers that. So now a lot of these incentives have actually pulled a lot of that, you know, would-be buyers of the older used cars into something newer when they actually start looking at the numbers and realizing that maybe there's some numbers here that make sense. So what we're seeing are sales on the older stuff that were popular for a while. Those vehicles are not selling as well, and sales are generally down. As a result, you can probably get some good deals in that space, but it's a lot of junk. Just a word to the wise. Okay, now let's go to the other end of the spectrum, and then we'll talk about some of the other spaces here shortly. Supercars, exotic cars, we're seeing taking a hit. And not just exotic cars, specialty cars, even Corvettes. Corvettes are going down, and I mean, there was a time when you had to pay vast amounts of money over invoice for, you know, the Corvettes. They were a very popular car. Every generation, the Stingray held on and they kept selling, and GM kept selling and selling, and they were always going for over sticker, and people were making vast amounts of money at the dealer level for those vehicles. Of course, then the Z06, you know, now there's talk about the ZR1. So there's all kinds of popular Corvettes that keep kind of getting unveiled and revealed, but it feels like it's losing its steam because even the latest and the greatest is not necessarily generating the hype. So we're seeing prices down on vehicles like Corvettes. Even new Corvettes are not necessarily selling as well. And if you look on car lots, drive by your local dealer, your GM dealer, and you'll find a lot of these cars for sale. I've driven by numerous dealers here locally, and I see a lot of these Corvettes for sale. I'm talking 20, 30 or more of them sitting on a car lot. They're just not selling all that well right now. Same thing goes for the exotic car space. I mean, we've heard about McLaren. They're going through a bit of an upset right now. They've got some great cars, but they've always seen heavy depreciation, and the fact that they're looking at new ownership is going to take a toll. Lamborghini, you know what, they got some new models like the Temerario. It's, you know, it remains to be seen on that vehicle. It's too new yet to tell. But even the Revuelto, very popular, you know, the Lamborghini Aventador replacement is unfortunately starting to see drops in values on the used car market. And I think that's a common theme that we're seeing with Lambo, McLaren, and more so even in Ferrari with the SF90, whereas the hybrid cars are taking an absolute beating right now. I mean, we've seen SF90s now that have lost, you know, a couple $100K. We've seen some of these cars changing hands at close to $1 million back a couple of years ago. Now, I mean, those cars are down, you know, high fours, $500,000 all day long. So a lot of the Ferraris, a lot of the, even Lambo's starting to trend that way. And anything's hybrid is not doing particularly well in the supercar space. And people are keeping their money closer to home or in more secured investments. If people wanted to buy supercars, they're looking at more of the popular older models. And the ones that are sort of commanding top dollar are those specialty older manual gated cars from Ferrari, gated cars, you know, like the Ford GT40s. Gated cars and unique, older, more analog driving experiences are the cars that are actually commanding the dollars, as are a weird anomaly. The Porsche 911 GT3 RS and the GT3s have always seemed to command top dollar. So the 911 market is still going boom. Okay, so, but those are sort of anomalies. Generally, the overall, the supercar market is shrinking right now. The sales are dropping, both new and used, and what we're finding is people are just trying to hold on to their money longer. In the midst of this cost of living crisis, people are less inclined to spend it on frivolous expenditures. $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 cars is not what most people are looking for. They're just trying to hunker down and keep roof over their head. Okay, so that's the supercar space in a nutshell. I do believe there will be some ups and downs and ebbs and flows. And I think where some of these popular new hybrid models by Ferrari, Lamborghini that are taking a bit of a hit right now, I believe they will come back. And, well, Ferrari, say the 296 just revealed a new Speciale, which is going to be a hot tamale. When a lot of people realize, wow, that is a special car. Just like the Pista or the Speciale and the 458, they're going to realize in about a year to a year and a half that a lot of those cars are actually worth something. The Speciale is going because it's more of a limited number, more of a special car, and it's a very expensive car, brand new. It's going to drive a lot of people focus on Ferrari brand again, and I believe some of those hybrid 296s are going to start to come up in value here within a year to 2 years' time. We're going to start to see prices creep back up just after they took an absolute beating on depreciation. Now, enough about that. What about vehicles like minivans? Well, we're seeing in the holiday season now, January, February, March, April. Okay, we're in the first quarter. As we enter what looks to be the end of the school season, what ends to be, entering sort of camping season, holiday season, vehicles like SUVs, minivans, the sales seem to be strong. Minivans are popular, even on the rental lots. I mean, for a lot of these vendors selling their inventory to rental companies like Hertz, I was driving by rental companies. I stopped by this weekend, and being a long weekend here in Canada, it's quite obvious with the fact that all the inventory was pretty much shopped out, that these long weekends and as we enter these holiday season, more and more of these rentals basically go bye-bye. So it's a popular season, not just for rentals, but as well as used vehicles or new vehicles that, of course, represent, the practical side. People moving, they're transporting their kids, transporting, for holidays, vacation, traveling. Minivans and smaller SUVs seem to fit the bill. Those are always popular. Now, luxury vehicles are taking a bit of a hit right now. Again, it's when, it's the boom and bust. When things are good and, everybody's making money and, unemployment's down, a lot of times that's when people are buying. But when things go the other way and, there's a lot of skepticism and stock prices are down and homelessness is up, job rates are the jobless rates are up, and people aren't feeling as confident. The buying in the more premium models of anything seems to be going away, and that's why smaller SUVs, smaller brand new SUVs and brand new cars are doing very well right now. But on the used car market, they are as well, because there's always that spillover, where you're getting popularity in certain genres that tends to carry over to the used car segment. So this is what's happening. Smaller, practical vehicles like minivans and SUVs are doing quite well for sales. You're probably going to pay a premium dollar for some of those vehicles, if we're being quite frank right now. Trucks. Okay, trucks. What about pickup trucks? That's a tough spot. There's a lot of change going on in the pickup truck segment. There's a lot of instability, and they're one of the most popular genres. People are buying trucks. They're still buying trucks, but there's a lot of trouble, a lot of turbulence in this space. Toyota is having a lot of troubles with their trucks. The Tundras are still dealing with hundreds of thousands of those recalls for the bad engines, or allegedly. Their Tacomas have had some troubles. They're transitioning. Of course, they've got that new 8-speed, so there's some troubles in there. So a lack of confidence with the Toyota brand overall right now. I believe they'll come back shortly, but that also transitions down to the new market or the used market. So what does that mean? That means for brands like Toyota, less popularity on their trucks, more popularity on their used trucks. Okay, they're older 4Runners with the older V6. They're older Tundras with the V8. So all their older trucks, older SUVs are rising in popularity. So what you're finding is, with problems with their new vehicles and the teething problems, a lot of their new vehicles and trucks are not doing that well, but their older used ones are doing very well. People are now reverting back or backdating to some of the older Toyotas. And this is a common thread. We're seeing this all over. So trying to find a low mileage, a Toyota 4Runner of the previous generation is a real challenge right now. And a lot of people are struggling to find those kinds of vehicles. That said, they are very popular. And they're definitely worth it. If you can find a good one with low mileage, definitely worth the weight in gold. Now, General Motors, struggling with some L87 engines. Bad, all kinds of troubles there. There's big discussions, almost 1 million problems, 1 million recalls for their 6.2 liter V8. It's a problem for GM right now, and they're struggling. So what does this mean? Well, their competition, of course, is picking up the slack. Ford is doing well, but they're also having recalls. Just seem to be slightly less problematic. I mean, they don't have catastrophic engine failures other than some of those, the 2.7s and the 3 liters. With EcoBoost, they were dropping valves for a short number of small VIN group. But I think it sounds like Ford's largely got a lot of that, looked after right now. And so that just generally means people are backdating Chevys, backdating Fords, looking for the generations that they knew were more familiar, that had some miles logged, that, didn't have some of those later VIN issues with, crankshaft issues like we're seeing in the L87, or of course the dropping valves in the newer versions of the 2.7. People are in some cases are buying some of these older trucks because they need them. They need them for work. They need them for play. But buying a new one is cost prohibitive, and it pushes the popularity of used trucks way up because of reliability issues in some of these new trucks, but also the sheer cost of these new trucks. I was down at the dealer the other day looking at a new Ram Tungsten 1500. It was $108,000 Canadian. Would you believe that? So who's buying that? Most people are going to say, you know what, I don't need that. I need a truck, so maybe I'll look at something 6 or 7 years of age, maybe with 80,000 miles on it, and I can get that for half the price. And a lot of people are doing that. So what you're seeing on the used car market for trucks is going up, up, up in the popularity. Therefore, inventory is going down. And so you're going to pay a little bit more these days for used pickup trucks because new trucks are so expensive and there's a lot of reliability challenges. Ram's changing to that new Hurricane Straight 6. So every brand right now seems to be going through some uncharted territory right now and waters that are a little turbulent, if you will. So this is just the market we're in. Now, the really small subcompact cars, the Mitsubishi Mirages and Nissan and the Versas and the Versa Notes and these kind of vehicles, contrary to popular belief, some people would think that they would sell like hotcakes, and kind of for a period they were. But it seems like those vehicles are less popular. Everybody complains about the cost of living crisis and the fact that they can't afford food in their mouth, or, they're complaining about joblessness, but then they go and they take out a car loan on a $40,000 car when these $20,000 cars are available. People still have these tastes. They want what they call, wine on a beer budget, if you can say. So, we all like nice things, but at the end of the day, we should be following and adhering to the 24-10 rule, right? The 24-10 rule. 20% down, 4 years max on your loan, and 10% maximum of your annual or your monthly salary should be going towards your car payments. So are you shopping for a new vehicle? I'd love to hear your comments down below. Also, do not forget to subscribe to the channel if you've been following and you like the content. It doesn't cost you anything. Just hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell, and it'll let you know when the next amazing video is popping. The third story. Stellantis. Oh boy. All we keep hearing is the troubles and the shenanigans that Stellantis is in. Yes, they actually may have to sell off some of their brands. Is it Maserati, Dodge, Jeep, Ram? I don't know. You tell me. With the lead of Carlos Tavares, he had this vision of bringing all of this electrification to a market that simply didn't want it. Of course, they have this diverse group of vehicle brands, many of which should actually go bye-bye. And if you really break it down, they actually have quite a substantial portfolio. But many of us would say, I'd never buy that piece of junk, or I'd never buy that piece of junk. And that's the only one that I would actually own. From my own personal opinion, with the incoming CEO literally knocking on the doors, coming in to make a whole new wholesale change, there's an opportunity to get Stellantis back on the wagon. They have some legendary brands and some brands that definitely could go bye-bye. Sometimes we just grow. We outgrow the industry. We think of vehicles like Saturn, like Pontiac. They went bye-bye many moons ago because they were redundant, unreliable, ugly, or they just didn't have a place. Nobody was buying them. Well, that's what's going on with Stellantis. And it's one of the biggest car companies in the globe, but you know what? They screwed up big time. In my own personal opinion, they've watered down the quality brands and they've created too much of a volume attitude with high profit margins on vehicles maybe that shouldn't because they were focused in the wrong place, like Jeep. Jeep, they really nailed down the high increased costs. Ram, You know, I was down looking at the Ram Tungsten on the weekend and I saw a $108,000 tag on a brand new Ram Tungsten. You talk about out of touch with the actual core buyers, that's got Stellantis in the dictionary right next to it. So let's just break this down. There's actually 4 brands that could go bye-bye. They need to get that money back into the organization. They need to stop the bleeding. Let those parasitic companies go away, or those brands, and bring the money back and develop certain brands instead. But let's talk about this because I have some ideas here. First of all, Ram. Ram is one, they're pickup trucks. We know that it's a popular truck. The problem is, even with about 15% of the sales in Stellantis coming from the Ram vehicles, that's clearly not enough. And the majority of the globe just doesn't give a damn about those types of trucks. They just don't care. And quite honestly, with vehicles like the Tungsten, they're just overpriced. So what actually should happen is Ram should stick around. I don't think Ram needs to go anywhere. I mean, we know sales were down and they had some fairly significant delivery times. They had a lot of inventory on the lots. But a lot of that was because of overproduction. They were trying to put too much on the market when the market just didn't command it. So that said, the Ram is still a pretty significant producer in terms of the overall profits and the sales. And as such, in my own personal opinion, Ram should continue on developing that. But they should look at maybe more of an international market, maybe focus on lower cost vehicles, maybe smaller, scaled down Ram trucks that they could sell across the globe, and really take a good hard look at the way they're building vehicles. Consider the costs that it's going in to make and manufacture some of these trucks. I mean, let's face it, who's got $108,000 for a half-ton truck these days? Not too many people I know. So really look inside and say, look, are we charging too much? And if we are, where are costs being consumed? How much are we actually wasting on parts, supply chain, staffing, multiple layers within the corporation? We need to thin the herd. We need to improve on costs and quality, but clearly things are a mess and they need to focus more on international markets. But Ram should stick around. Another one, Jeep. Now we know Jeep, they've come and gone. In many cases, we've seen some of their prices go really through the roof. And quite honestly, unjustifiably so. Renegade went bye-bye. Overpriced trash. Fiat Panda, yeah, nobody really wanted them. That's no reason they went. It's actually a really good reason they went away. Then what about, we've talked about the Compass, and I've showed you Compasses Compi for $55,000 Canadian for a fully loaded Compass. Like, what are we thinking, guys? Like, come on, Jeep. Let pull your head out of that. Anyway, Jeep Grand Cherokees, very popular. A lot of people love them, and they give you a third row, and they've been around a long time, and they're durable, and they tow, and they do all the right things. A lot of people love the branding, so they seem to be sticking around. But really, maybe look at those costs a little bit. Trim that back. And this is what's going to have to happen, in my own personal opinion. Jeep's going to have to start shedding some of that skin, that snake skin, like the Compasses, the Renegades. All of that volume crap, they need to get rid of. Straight up. Focus on their core. The Wranglers, that's one of their cores. That's where Jeep came from. Focus on that. Provide the value there again. Maybe look at the pricing. Again, don't cheap out. Don't put lower grade parts to lower the cost. Try to improve on that quality, of course, but do it in a way by eliminating some of the outlier volume junk. Compasses and Renegades. Maybe focus on trimming down the number of unique models. So Wranglers should stick around. Gladiators seem to have a place because they're sort of loosely based on the Wrangler. And a Jeep Grand Cherokee. What more do you need? Those are the popular models. And if you need smaller SUVs, focus in some of the other spaces, which we'll get to in a second. But being that they're about 15% of Stellantis' overall sales, Jeep should not go anywhere. I mean, we know Jeep's probably not realistically going anywhere, at least on its own. I mean, it's one thing if Stellantis decides to part out and sell individual brands. That's another conversation that we've spoken about before. But as a brand specifically, I'm not talking about the company of Stellantis, but the brand has a place in the market and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Now, here's one that really should hit the ropes. Like, truly, truly Chrysler. I mean, what is it? Chrysler Pacifica or the Caravans, like absolute trash. I mean, if we're being honest, there's way better options. Who buys minivans other than rental companies today? And clearly, as a result, we're not seeing a whole lot of success, okay? They're not seeing a lot of sales other than the minivan fleets that go to these rental companies. Nobody really buys them. You don't see too many that don't have a business license plate on them. So really, they could get rid of that. Who wants Chrysler? Chrysler, we know, Junior Chrysler was looking at buying the brand. I mean, Chrysler comes from an historical background, but all they're doing is just allowing the bleed and the persistence of this failure to continue on and on and on. And so as a result, I truly believe Chrysler needs to go away. Now, Pacifica, who needs that junk? There's other options out there. If you need a minivan, Toyota and Honda's got you covered. Even Hyundai, Kia, they've got their minivans. And Chrysler, it's not that they don't have something to offer. They do have a history with minivans, but if that's exclusively the only vehicle in the Chrysler brand today, that should be maybe a model at best, a Chrysler model, but not an actual breakout brand specifically. Maybe it could be tucked in as a Dodge product. So anyway, Chrysler should go bye-bye. Dodge, see, that's where Dodge messed up. We know Dodge messed up, and they messed up bad because they went with this electrified BS, these Chargers. Nobody's buying them. They're knocking. If you look on the classifieds, I've been looking here for the recently, and I'm finding a lot of those now are being discounted $20,000, $30,000, even 40 grand off sticker. It's absolutely bizarre to me. Okay, nobody wants the electrified Charger. So with this electronic or digitized engine sound, yeah, nobody's really interested in that junk. Okay, so that was a mistake. And that was Carlos, in my own personal opinion. He had this vision of going pure EV, but doing it to brands that thrived on muscle cars. I mean, what is Dodge? Dodge should bring a muscular attitude. The supercharged V8, the Hemis, even the Durangos, muscle, fun, fury, muscle car. That's what Dodge is about. Hemi. We're talking about Mopar. Come on, guys. Remember Plymouth? Well, they're gone. Okay, don't make Dodge go away as well. So in my own personal opinion, bring back the brash, the bold, and bring back like muscle. But not so many watered down models. Just make it count, okay? Make it count. Niche in there. Niche to those buyers that want that muscle. And that's what Dodge should become. Get back focused into that space, and I think you'll find success. Peugeot, they're not going anywhere. They're too big. They're 20% of the sales. Now, we don't see that in North America. We don't really care. But certainly in Europe, that's a brand that's going to be around for a while. And we know Peugeot, French brand, they're just going to be around. They're also building engines or designing engines for other brands like Mercedes-Benz and the likes of that. So they're not going anywhere. How about Citroën and DS? Well, Citroën, French, DS, trash. There's an 8-to-1 sales advantage from Citroën over DS. Now, Citroën does sell a lot of cars in Europe too, and they don't seem to be like they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. DS, bye-bye. Another brand, a lot of you probably haven't even heard of them, and I haven't heard of them myself up until recently, quite honestly, should go away. So they need to really look to that and say, look, okay, there's a bit of a heritage there, but nobody really cares. Nobody really cares about this DS brand and dumb shit brand, if you will. So make it go away. Citroën can stick around. Again, in Europe, they're fine. Opel, Vauxhall, I know in North America, they're not brands that we care about. But again, in Europe, you've got to think in Europe is a big part of Stellantis, the company where they kind of derive themselves from. Opel and Vauxhall both have substantial market share. And, the heritage, the German Opel brand originally, and then, GM took it over, and now we're talking Stellantis. There's a popularity there that you just can't deny. And, I've driven Opels myself, and they offer, a cost-effective and affordable car. Like, I've been to Europe numerous times, and Opel is a very compelling buy. And that's why people buy them there. That's why it's not a brand that you want to retire anytime soon. Neither do you with Vauxhall. That's another popular brand. You really don't want to ignore those two. They're really, really got a place. Now, Lancia is another brand that you're probably thinking, okay, they've been around for a long time, maybe 120 years or 118, 119 years, I think. They've been around a long time. Like it actually has a lot of history to it in Italy. It's really unfortunate. But sometimes you got to say goodbye. And that's just what we're talking about. Lancia, got to say goodbye because nobody's buying it. Like, I guess you'd have to ask yourself, like, who actually, even if you live in Europe, who's buying Lancias these days? I think they're beautiful, beautiful, sculpted in the Italian way, but nobody's buying them. So as a result, I think Lancias need to go hit the road. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more. Anyway, forget it. I'm not a singer. Okay, Fiat, also the big daddy. Remember Fiat? They owned Ferrari for a while, and they've got a lot more money on the table than you'd believe. Now, we don't necessarily in North America love the Fiat all that much, but they're way too big. Fiat matches Peugeot's 20% market share as well in terms of, or Stellantis sales portfolio. So they're making 20% of the sales right off of Fiat. They're way too big. They're not going to be ignored. Sure, they had the 500 they made go away, and the 500e, this new electric, is not selling well here in North America. So they're representing it. It's like, here's the product. I think they're kind of cute, and there might be an opportunity if the pricing's right. We know they were heavily incentivized, but Fiat's just too big. They're not going anywhere. And, you know, if the company, for their success, their future success, they want to keep products and assets and product lines like Fiat around that are money makers. 20%, that's 1/5 of the company's sales are coming from Fiat. So you may not like them here in North America, but in Italy and certainly in Europe, they like them. Abarth, another one. You know, the tricolor, the Abarth, which is sort of the little hot version of the Fiat 500. They're the sporty, spirited, funky, you know, fluffy, quick, fun little cars. I've driven them. They're peppy and they're fun driving, absolutely. But they're basically loosely based on a hot rod, highly strung 500. So definitely they're not probably going to go anywhere. They actually have a pretty substantial margin because they built this Abarth on a low total entry-level platform like a 500, which is cheap, cheap, cheap. And with a few little tweaks and mods, they've created this sort of unique spin-off brand called the Abarth. So there's huge profit margin, and they really need to keep that brand around and maybe build it up to something maybe a little more substantial, a little more focused, maybe bring maybe an entry-level, possibly something that's maybe a little more upstream, something that's a little more, you know, higher performance. But Abarth, probably something that Stellantis needs to keep around. Now, here's where things get ugly, and we've talked about this, and I still even get confused with this myself. Alfa Romeo and Maserati, we speak of Italian brands, of course, owned. Not a good scene, okay? Those companies aren't doing all that well. And it's unfortunate because I truly believe that they offer some amazing driving experiences. But the problem is, you know, Maserati, in all their infinite wisdom, went and started stealing parts from the Dodge parts bin. So it's okay to see these switchgear and buttons and knobs from a Chrysler minivan, but then to see it in your $350,000 Maserati supercar, it's an insult. Same with some of their premium Maserati cars. They drive well, and in some cases they utilize derivatives of Ferrari drivetrains. Amazing cars. The Maseratis are beautiful, but their depreciation is atrocious. Partially because of reliability, massive extreme maintenance costs, you know, durability, the fact that, you know, the network for repair shops is minimal. There's not as much service availability for those vehicles, and they just cost so extraordinarily much when they're brand new. Alfa Romeo also has a legendary name, but the problem is Alfa, same thing. It's got, you know, it's got that Italian verve, if you will. They're fun cars. They're beautiful. I personally love both of them. But the problem is the basic finances don't allow me to buy those at this time because of the massive depreciation from both brands. Now there's some redundancy. You have two Italian luxury brands within Stellantis. See, that's a mistake right there. So one of them needs to go. What's your thoughts? Which brand do you think they could kick to the curb and you would never miss it? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well below. The fourth story. This car buying frenzy just keeps going on and on and on. People just don't know when to quit, and that's driving prices up. And these OEMs know full well that you can't resist a nice new shiny paint job. On one hand, you say some people are blaming some of this new economic market as some new taxes that are coming down the chute. Other people are saying it's the greedflation of a lot of these OEMs. But realistically, let's think about this. The last 5 years, we've seen prices go up 20, 30, 40% on a lot of these vehicles. I saw a recent Ram Tungsten here go for $108,000 Canadian. It's getting out of hand. So prices are surging. What's going on? Do you think you should be buying a car right now? Well, I'll let you decide. But according to Cox Automotive, we've seen in the last month a 2.5% increase in the average transaction price up to about $48,700. And as well, the month before, 1.1%. So we're seeing this steady uptick in the price of these new vehicles. So what else is new? That's what we've been seeing for the last 4 or 5 years. The worst part is a lot of this noise that's going around has people panic buying. They're going out and they're buying cars regardless. They think that they need to get ahead of the curve to avoid certain taxes. But in reality, so what some experts are saying, that you might see an increased tax applied to some of these new vehicles by as little as $2,000 or as much as $15,000, depending on where you fall in the spectrum and the price of that vehicle you're looking at. So buying a brand new car is a pricey expedition. An expedition it is. It's quite the journey these days, battling with all of the ins and outs of the car market, dealerships, shifty salespeople, crafty marketing techniques, and dealership ploys just to get you in there to spend your hard-earned dollars. But because of all this panic buying, it's the consumer that is causing a lot of this problem, because what we're seeing is Cox Automotive now is saying they no longer need to offer as much incentives on the buying of a new car. We know incentives were pushing a lot of products and, a lot of vehicles with a lot of standing time on dealerships. Days supply, for example, Ram, Jeep, Chrysler were some of the biggest culprits. But a lot of these OEMs are struggling selling cars. Or are they? See, because ultimately, people are still buying these vehicles. Incentives are reduced now. That's right. Vehicles are selling anyway. And what they're saying, according to Cox Automotive, we're seeing the average incentive going down, only being 6.7% now of the transaction price, or about $3,262, all the way down 7% from the month before in the month of March. So while the market is clearly a have or a have not, and full-size pickup trucks are no longer something that afforded by contractors or, just the middle class that just needs a truck to haul their little trailer to the cabin on the weekend, or possibly pickup truck for some light duty jobs, any kind of hauling duties, that's no longer available for a lot of buyers, because a lot of buyers are pushed out of that market now, with pickup trucks soaring in prices that range anywhere from $70,000, $80,000, $110,000, even $130,000 for a loaded up diesel truck. Means those that really need these trucks the most are the ones that can least afford it. It's just a sad state of what's going on in the market today. Now, granted, the overall average transaction price is going up, not because more people aren't buying less and cheaper vehicles, because that is happening. There's people that were buying, that mid-level vehicle, an SUV, like a Jeep Grand Cherokee, finding now those at $80,000, $90,000 are unaffordable. So those types of buyers are now saying, you know what, maybe I'll go with a smaller Toyota RAV4 or something, and they're making these concessions to buy something cheaper. So they're buying that smaller, cheaper SUV. But now buying a Jeep Grand Cherokee is something that more or less more luxury car buyers are buying, because whereas, they might have bought a BMW X5 with the upscale twin turbo V8 in the M50 series of vehicles, they're looking at those vehicles going up in price. Now, a lot of luxury car buyers are saying, wow, has that new X5 gone out of control? I'm going to move down into a Jeep Grand Cherokee. So the whole market is cascading. People are dropping their guard, and what I'm seeing are people are lowering their standards. And you have brands like Jeep that have promoted themselves as luxury brands, and so it's sort of the storms come together, and now you have buyers accepting and conceding to say, look, a Jeep Grand Cherokee is a luxury vehicle. Hey, honey, what do you think? Instead of that X5, that's too much. Those payments are ridiculous. I can't afford $3,000 a month. Yeah, you're right. Why don't we buy that Jeep Grand Cherokee? Everybody's saying that it's actually a luxury vehicle these days. So now you have, spouses talking, saying and agreeing, okay, Jeep is now a luxury brand. And so Jeep's selling it and promoting themselves as such. And brands like, BMW, Audi, Benz are pushing their products to an astronomical place. And we're seeing it in sales, because Mercedes-Benz sales are grossly down. BMWs haven't been doing particularly well. And realistically, we're even seeing some big changes in the Porsche landscape or the Cadillac. But there are some big outliers. The most expensive luxury vehicles are come from two major brands, and those are bringing and drawing those numbers up. When we talk about average transaction price, Porsche is the leader of that average. So within the brand, the average Porsche is bringing that numbers up. $114,000 is the average Porsche price, new purchase price. Of course, it doesn't hurt or doesn't help that you have brands or the models like the GT3 RS or the 911 GT or 911 Turbo S, and models that bring those prices up. Even with the lower cost Macans and entry-level Cayennes, the average price just comes up because of a very expensive vehicles like the 911 series of vehicles there. So Porsche is a high one. A second one to that is a Land Rover, averaging $113,000. And would you believe it? I even looked the other day and I checked out a brand new Range Rover, not for myself, just shopping and trying to stay in touch with the market. And I saw one for $335,000 Canadian for a full-size Range Rover. And I'm thinking to myself, who's buying that and why? I mean, for $350,000, get into a Ferrari, you probably keep a little more money parked in there. Or even a Lamborghini, you're probably safer with your investment there as well. So buying a car like this just makes no sense. But those are drawing the average transaction prices up. And that's what's happening. But a lot of buyers sort of stuck in the middle are now being pushed the other way. So you sort of have this divergence in the market. You have those middle class right here that can no longer afford what would be previously perceived as the middle class vehicle, like pickup trucks, small Jeep SUVs, vehicles, for the masses. And I'll tell you, I don't know too many people that can afford a lot of these, a full-size loaded up version of any Jeep these days, or even any brand new pickup trucks. How many people do you know, unless you're coming from, that circle of millionaires? But really, let's ask seriously, of the general population, the 97 percentile, how many of you do you know, how many friends, family, relatives do you know that just bought a brand new truck? Loaded up Denali, Lariat, any of those. How many do you really know? Just ask yourself rhetorically, maybe drop it in the comment section below. Do you know lots of people, or do you know nobody who's affording these new trucks? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But what we're seeing is this frenzy, this buying frenzy of what was highly marketed and highly incentivized vehicles. Even Nissan's heavily incentivizing their cars and trucks and SUVs. They initially got customers in the door. Of course, now we're also seeing this new rhetoric, this new stories that you've got to get it done by this month, because these new taxes are about to be applied. So you've got this newfound frenzy of buying. And of course, this newfound frenzy of buying means these OEMs don't need to incentivize. So that's why we're seeing incentives dropping. The smaller portion of that transaction on average is going down. That represents that incentive purchase. Okay? In other words, less people are getting a good deal. More people are paying sticker above still to this day. And while everybody likes to blame what's going on in this last month or two for these new taxes that are about to be applied to all of these new vehicles, the fact remains is I post a challenge to each and every one of you personally, as well as OEMs. Okay, OEMs, how is it then if you are blaming these new taxes and, they've got to scramble and get their vehicles to market and we've got to get these people buying, like Ford's offering these employee discounts? That's hilarious. They're saying they're holding a stable market. But when I'm seeing a $55,000 Tremor version of the Maverick, I just shake my head and wonder, how in the hell did we get there when that was supposed to be a $25,000 little pickup truck to fill in a gap? Now they're overlapping in, XLT F-150. Things are getting out of control. How did we get here? And realistically, a lot of these OEMs, I'm asking you, how do you feel that all of a sudden you're willing to blame what's going on with these newfound taxes, getting the public instigated, getting the public anxious, getting the public frenzy buying, thinking they've got to get ahead of that curve, when up to about 2 months ago, the prices have skyrocketed. So this price adjustments, price creep that's been going on for the last 4 to 5 years had nothing to do with increased taxes. It had everything to do with price increases. So is it time for you to buy, or are you going to hold off? Maybe the chances of these prices still continue to drop. We'll see. As well, don't forget the membership program. You want to become a member, learn a little more about ECPP? Right there, hit that membership button. You're going to love it. The fifth story, should you buy a new vehicle right now? What do you think they're going to be like in 10 years? You're probably going to look back and think, boy, I should have got it back then. You may not like what's out there today, but wait for 10 years and you're going to see how things really change. Or maybe you should just buy something used and be done with it. 10 years ago, cars were all pretty simple relative to today. New technology, reliability issues, catastrophic engine failures, and recalls every single week. It doesn't become obvious to me that the reliability is getting up. It seems to be going down. Every single week, you're hearing of some weird catastrophic failure, some big recall that's taking out the latest and greatest. I mean, GM's going through this, almost 1 million vehicles now being recalled because of that bad L87, or alleged to be bad, with, connecting rod issues and crankshaft issues, allegedly, that are taking out bearings. And, Ford's been having recalls with transmissions and dropping valves on, some of their 2.7s and 3-liter EcoBoost engines. And, even Ram, Stellantis, lots of shortcomings there with reliability challenges, quality issues. And then you look at the cars. I mean, what are the cars going through as well? I mean, the transformation, almost every car now is losing and giving up their older naturally aspirated V6s, V8s, and now replacing them with turbocharged 3-cylinder vehicles that are direct injected, or Turbo 4s are replacing older V6s. Reliability is certainly at question. On top of it, now with most manufacturers are still starting to handcuff you there with subscription services. Means that just because you buy your vehicle today, it's not a once and done. Quite often, it seems as though the dealer network, or certainly the industry as a whole, is transforming to one in which they've got you almost throughout the duration and the life of that vehicle in some way. Whether it's they tie you with software in their diagnostic equipment that means that you have to go back to the dealer to service that, or the subscription services means that if you want that heated seats or some of that navigation, you're probably going to have to pay the piper. I mean, a lot of these OEMs, and General Motors being one of them specifically, BMW being another, and many others realistically, are hedging their bets on the fact that people are going to continue paying subscription services. And while a lot of us think it's absolutely ludicrous, it's hilarious because they sell it on the fact that most customers advocate for it. Well, I only use my heated seats in the wintertime, so why would I actually not worry about that? I'll just take out a subscription services. Everybody's got streaming videos. Everybody's got cell phones they pay monthly fees on. So why wouldn't you just pay monthly fees on extra features of your vehicle? Because it's ridiculous. That's why. Because we paid for the vehicle. We paid for the hardware inside and the wiring and the technology. So why are you putting a software block in front of it? It's absolutely lunacy. But should we be buying a vehicle today? I mean, cars, trucks, reliability issues seem to be creeping up every single day. New tech, expensive prices. Should we even be buying a new vehicle? Well, the long and short of it is both yes and no. It's kind of a bit of a mixed answer. And the reason I say that is because what's down the road may, in fact, be even worse than what we see today. I mean, if we see this evolution, of course, of the car industry and, this transformation going from, internal combustion to then introducing hybrid and then pure EVs. And then, of course, now there's, mixing all kinds of different tech. And things have really moved very briskly in the industry as a whole. I mean, just think, it was only maybe 5 years ago, electric vehicles were an extreme rarity. And now, in California alone, they're at pretty much 1 in 5 vehicles are driving electric vehicles. That's right. The latest statistic shows that almost 20% of the vehicles sold today are electric vehicles in California. Now, that said, they're a one-off, and there's many states that won't even have it. Think about states like Montana. Think about states, some of the northern states that were, conventionally, they need those internal combustion vehicles. They have long spaces between cities and towns. Okay, so EVs aren't going to sell everywhere, but just think about where the industry was a few short years ago. We weren't even talking about a lot of this. And in 5 years, things have literally turned upside down. So much, in fact, so even supercar manufacturers are pretty much hanging all of their technology on hybrids and electric vehicles. You know, just word has it, Ferrari's coming out with a new electric vehicle. Go figure. You know, they've got a couple of hybrid cars right now, the SF90, the 296. You know, we've got the Artura there by McLaren. Lamborghini's got the Temerario and Revuelto. And so it's pretty obvious that everybody's sort of anticipating and transitioning to that place. So when is that time? And should we be buying now, or did we miss the boat? Did we absolutely miss the boat of some of the best vehicles? Because when you think about it this way, and you know, while, I mean, depending on what's going on, you know, at a higher level and the laws and regulations that are passed or passed on, it may or may not, in fact, you know, change the trajectory of this technology change. But I mean, at a global scale, every OEM and the environmentalists are really focused in on this 2035 target. And so a number that puts, you know, a lot of this technology transitioning to there, you know, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. I mean, there is certainly an argument for getting a vehicle now or even slightly backdating. I mean, the idea of buying something that's 20 years old is fine up until the fact that they discontinue the parts you need to fix it, or it just rusts out, or even worse, somebody hits it and wrecks it and writes it off. Now, where does that leave us? You can't buy an older car because they have a limited lifespan. You could maybe look at those interim cars that were, you know, I think about back in that 2012 to about 2018, 2017 target, 2018 years. And you can still get predominantly internal combustion vehicles. Some of them may still have low mileage. And a lot of the technology generally was a little bit more old school than as you look today. But as we transition, and they're saying, you know, by 2030, there's got to be a higher percentage. By 2032, it's a higher percent. And so every year, every manufacturer is selling more and more higher ratio of EVs, zero emission. Hydrogen is on the radar too. And that transition towards these newer technologies, these greener energy sources, is moving us to a place where if you thought you liked your V8 engine, if you thought you liked your diesel engine, even if you thought you know what, a plug-in hybrid works, but that's as far as I want to go to that type of technology, just think that even a plug-in hybrid has an internal combustion engine, and even that will eventually be obsolete because that's not the total target to zero. So we're in this space right now where OEMs are pretty much handcuffed, at least predominantly across the globe. Now that, again, ebbs and flows, and it seems depending on local legislations and laws and lawmakers. But ultimately, the overall wave of change seems to be in the air. And, you know, what it seems to be is, I look today and I say, wow, I wish I had a vehicle brand new, you know, 5 years ago, maybe a 2018, whatever it is, or maybe even a 2015. And I go far enough back and say, yeah, they had the V8s, and yeah, they were reliable back then, and things have changed, and now they've got rod bearing problems, and now they've got issues. Think of the Toyota Tundra as a classic example. I mean, you talk about backdating, but most of those, they're gas guzzlers, and it was funny because when you were in the moment, nobody wanted them. Nobody wanted the FJ Cruisers. I mean, they were heavy on fuel. They didn't sell in big numbers, and at the time, nobody really knew what they had. Nobody really knew what that was. I mean, they knew what it was, but they really weren't that interested. They were always looking at the big screens, the latest technology. Wow, this one has all the safety features. But guess what? Now, fast forward to the future, and we're here. We have the big screens. We have the safety technologies. Vehicles are safer than they've ever been with crumple zones, you know, detection programs that keep vehicles safe and prevent accidents in the first place. Now that we're here, we want to go back, or many people do anyway. So I always think of it that way. And you think of cars, example, Ferrari, SF90, 296 as classic examples. A lot of the true loyalists and enthusiasts right now believe that, you know, I don't want that. Like 296s, I don't want hybrid stuff. I want good old-fashioned V12s or that mid-engine V8 car, that supercar. Well, guess what? That's true in a lot of ways. The loyalists, that's what they're looking for. But think about another 10 years down the road, when Ferrari transitions to who knows where they're headed, like every other OEM, it might be a lot more pure electric vehicles, as in Europe, the EU7 standards holds them to even a higher account. And so a lot of these manufacturers have to really target their core audience, which is their local homeland. So what does that mean? That means a lot of these cars are going to be pushing harder, even going more towards EVs. And then in 10 years from now, when all you can get, and you walk in the showroom and all you can get is an electric Ferrari, then you look back, boy, I wish I had that. 10 years ago, I would take a 296, I would take an SF90 in a heartbeat. And see, I believe that's where the market is trending. And so, interestingly enough, as the market changes, we always look back and say, you know what, that was the good old days. And I wish I had a vehicle from 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, you didn't buy one because you probably maybe weren't ready, didn't have the finances, other priorities, and just didn't care about that vehicle at that time. Again, I use the Tundra as a classic example. The old 5.7, it was a real gem. But people were buying them, but just they weren't going like hotcakes. They were just selling and just an average rates of any other vehicle. And people were just, buying if needed. Otherwise, they just didn't bother. Now, fast forward, we're in a place now where they've got these issues with these engines. And now a lot of people that would be prospective Toyota owners and loyalists are looking back and say, those were the good old days. What are we doing with these new turbo engines, direct injection, blown engines, main bearings are falling out of, what is going on here? Now we think about the good old days. And this is where the market's trending. So this isn't a conversation about getting everybody quickly, hurry up and buying frenzy, because I spoke of that yesterday about buying frenzies and sort of how we get there in the first place. And it's unfortunate because a lot of the OEMs realize that and are taking advantage with greedflation. But realistically, think about what that future is transitioning to. You think you maybe don't like what the market has to offer today. What do you think it's going to offer in 10 years from now? So think about this. If you take care of a car and it's a good quality, reputable brand, generally I use a brand like Honda or Toyota, although they've been really changing course in my own personal opinion lately. You think of brands like that, and if you take care of it, oil service, take it in for regular maintenance, those cars can probably last you 15, 20, 25 years. Okay, so you think, if I'm, say, 50 years of age, and I'm shopping for a new car, I'm that guy, I'm 50, middle age, winding down my career, maybe retire in 5 to 10 years, and I got to think about, I better get myself a car while I can now, because once I'm retired, I'll be in fixed income, so I'm going to be buying something that I can afford today, so that it lasts me, because if I take care of it, it's probably good for 15 or 20 years. Well, if you think about that, if you wait, the only option may be what's in the future, and what's in the future may be yet to be understood, because we don't even know what we don't know yet. What we don't know are some of the technology. EVs, hydrogen, that might be a thing, although even if they transition to that, what does that look like? What does that market space look like when we consider there's no filling stations virtually anywhere in the nation, or very few? I mean, the whole infrastructure upgrade would have to be done on a monumentally fast and accelerated time frame. So for now, EV seems to be the only modicum of tech that you can get your hands on that reaches zero emissions, that has a bit of an infrastructure tied to it. So here we are. Do we buy a car right now? A truck, an SUV? Well, as I started in the beginning, one would think, get it now. Get it now. Why? Well, because in 10 years, it might be all hydrogen, it might be all electric vehicles, and we may not have a choice, and we'll be looking back. But the unfortunate reality, I look now and you say, okay, is now the time to buy? So I think about this for a second. We know the prices of vehicles are getting extraordinarily high. We know that the less you have to deal with dealerships and salespeople, the better. So in other words, a more infrequent buying experience is really the best thing going, right? I mean, keep something for a much longer period of time, take care of it. You're not dealing with the experience of the salespeople. You're not dealing with all of that. And certainly if you're buying something in the now, it's probably going to be better than what's in 10 years from now, where everything's likely going to be subscription based. But what we're looking right now, and when I say this wave of technology, unfortunately there's another wave right behind it. and that's reliability or lack thereof. Because I can't even think right now, a full-size half-ton truck, Tundra, bad bearings. GM, bad bearings, crankshaft issues, lifter issues, and transmission problems. Stellantis with a Ram, who knows, lifter ticks. We have all these problems with the older outgoing Hemis. This new Hurricane engine, who knows what that thing's in for yet, time will tell. So what does this mean? What does this really mean? Durability seems to be taking a back seat. You know, Nissan, everybody's going to these CVTs. That's eating everybody's lunch. That's hurting reputations and destroying some car manufacturers as well. So right now, it feels like we're on the eve of this massive dark reliability issue with almost every one of, even the trusted brands like Toyota and possibly Honda are going through these waves of reliability issues. And all at once. Like, I look around and I can't think of a reliable truck that I could say, I want a full-size truck and I expect it to last 20 years. I don't think there's one truck on the market right now that will last over 10 years. That's my own personal opinion. I think the way they're built now, the quality's not there. Too much plastic. Now they're all turbos. Direct injection creates more carbon, more, fouling within the vehicle itself. These turbos create extra heat, more plastics, failures, cracks, leaks. Over convoluted, I saw the other day, this bypass valve of sorts, whereas most OEMs use a conventional thermostat, usually a little small component, opens and closes to allow coolant to flow either through the engine or through the cooling loop. And a thermostat is a simple device. And lo and behold, GM had to go and re-engineer, refabricate, and come up with this new convoluted design that's about this big, and it's probably going to cost you $2,000 to replace just the part alone, plus the labor, which means you have to disassemble half of the front of the engine. So they're not just creating, in my mind, unreliable parts, but they're over-engineering a lot of these parts, and unfortunately they're expensive and they're prone to failure. So where does this leave us? Where does this leave us? Does this leave us in a spot where we can fully invest right now, buy a new car, truck, SUV with the full confidence that we could last this vehicle well into our retirement and beyond? That we know that we buy a vehicle today, that it's going to go 15, 20, 25 years without even question just by changing the oil? I don't think so. And see, that's the problem. That is the conundrum. We backdate too far. Now all those good vehicles are miled out, they're worn out, and we're running out of inventory. Why do you think the used car market is as hot as it is? It's largely because people know what they know. And they know some of the older vehicles have what's left of sort of a durable drivetrain setup. I mean, now we're at a place where, we're transitioning again to subscriptions, unreliability, the transformation, smaller turbo engines, 3-cylinder turbos. Think of the EcoSport by Ford or GM's little Turbo 3. They're putting those in just about everything. And a lot of them are failing. They just don't have the lifespan to them. Subscription. Pfft, yeah, right. If I'm paying a subscription on some hardware I already paid for, not a chance. So is this the time to buy the vehicle? Well, there are a few gems out there, okay? There are a few gems, and with a bated breath, I have to say that there are still some opportunities to get some decent vehicles that I truly do believe will last. But the problem is you can't paint it all with one brush, because I truly believe that we're in the eve of these reliability issues, subscription-based services, and this whole change. We're going to lose options for choosing a vehicle that we feel that is actually built well. You're not going to want to keep a vehicle. Some of these vehicles now, the way they're built and manufactured, you need a team. You need a Formula One race team behind you pretty much to disassemble that thing with all of the impact tools, specialty tools, diagnostic equipment. You need all that equipment at hand to be able to service that. So the days of DIY, for people like me and a lot of you like to fix your own vehicles, those days are going away, and quickly. So this isn't the doom and gloom. This is, on the contrary, realizing that this may be that time when you start to really think about, is this time to buy? I mean, whether it's, a 6-year-old used vehicle that maybe you stumble across and it's a gem and it's only got 35,000 miles on it, that could be a keeper, because that's before this whole swing. Or maybe today, there's still some great cars. I mean, look at some of the Mazdas. If you need a smaller car or SUV, Mazda 3, the CX-50, the CX-5 represent some really durable Skyactiv technology. Okay, that's hype, but they're a reliable vehicle. They still have a torque converter auto. They still have a durable engine. You can get either naturally aspirated or turbocharging. And they're still a relatively reliable vehicle that you can get hundreds of thousands of miles. And granted, yeah, you look statistically, Yukons and a lot of those vehicles with the 5.3s and the 6.2s still have engines that can probably run the distance. The problem is you're dealing with a lot of reliability issues. There's a lot of people losing engines or locking up, and the 6.2s are having some big issues. Interestingly enough, the 5.3s not as much. So there's still some opportunities to get some of the what's sort of on the outlier of some of the V8s and some of the old school engines that have just been revamped with some ridiculous technology like cylinder deactivation. But that said, there's still some opportunities for some decent vehicles. What do you think? Are you ready to buy now? Do you think you should wait, or do you should maybe backdate and find something older and used? And with all of that said, be sure to check out the most reliable vehicles right there. Popular video, you're going to love that one. And as well, the most unreliable vehicles you're going to want to follow. They're long, binge-worthy type videos. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. See you real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.